I still remember the sound of the rain that day. It wasn't gentle or soothing. It was the kind of rain that slammed against windows and turned the streets into rivers, leaving you with the feeling that something was coming. Something heavy, unstoppable. I had packed my umbrella and a small tin of cookies I'd baked that morning, thinking it might cheer my daughter up. But the umbrella was no match for the wind, and the cookies felt ridiculous in my lap as the taxi wound through unfamiliar streets toward her new home. Her home. Not ours, that word still stung. Just 2 weeks earlier, she had moved out with her husband, settling into a suburban neighborhood that seemed too polished, too staged, like one of those catalog pictures where every lawn is perfectly trimmed and every mailbox polished. I had told myself it was normal, that a mother should be proud when her daughter builds a life of her own. And I was proud, or at least I wanted to be. But underneath that pride was a knot of worry I couldn't untangle. Her phone calls had grown shorter, her voice tight. And yesterday she'd said something I couldn't shake. "Mom, don't come by unannounced. It's not safe. Safe." What kind of word was that to use about your own home? The cab turned down a row of identical houses, each with white fences and flower beds lined like soldiers. My daughter's house was the third on the left, with new curtains in the windows and a porch swing that creaked in the storm. I paid the driver and stepped out, clutching the tin of cookies as if it could anchor me against the wind. I rang the bell once, then twice. Finally, the door opened a crack, and there she was, her face pale in the dim light, eyes darting past me before settling reluctantly on mine. "Mom, you shouldn't be here," she whispered. I smiled, trying to keep my voice steady. "I brought you cookies. Just thought I'd stop by. It's awful weather, isn't it?" But instead of welcoming me inside, she tightened her grip on the doorframe. "Mom, please. You can't come in. Not today, not ever, really." The words hit harder than the rain. "Not ever?" I repeated, my voice cracking. "I'm your mother. Why would you say something like that?" She swallowed, her eyes glistening. "Because I need to protect you." "Please go." Before I could answer, the door closed. A quiet final click of the lock followed, leaving me on the porch with nothing but my umbrella and the storm. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the rain dripping from my hair, my heart pounding in disbelief. I wasn't just unwelcome, I was banished. By the time I gathered enough strength to walk down the steps, my shoes were soaked through. I didn't even know where to go. The taxi had left, and the rain blurred the street into a watery haze. That's when I heard a voice behind me. "Are you her mother?" I turned. An older woman stood on the neighboring porch, wrapped in a shawl, her gray hair plastered against her forehead by the storm. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She just looked at me with eyes full of something I couldn't place. Pity, maybe. Or fear, yes, I said cautiously. "I'm her mother. Do you know why she won't let me inside?" The woman glanced at my daughter's house, then back at me. She took a step closer, lowering her voice as if the rain itself might be listening. "She's afraid. And if you knew what I've seen at night in that house, you'd be afraid too." Her words sliced through the storm. Suddenly, the rain wasn't the loudest thing anymore. My pulse was. I clutched the tin of cookies tighter, as if holding on to something sweet might shield me from the darkness spilling out of her words. "What have you seen?" I asked. The woman's lips pressed together, her eyes narrowing. She looked at me as though she was weighing the risk of telling me, as though some truths were too dangerous to be spoken on a rainy street. Finally, she whispered, "Lights at hours, when no one should be awake. Shadows moving where there shouldn't be, and screams." The storm swallowed the last word, but it still rang in my ears. Screams. I turned to look at my daughter's house again. The curtains were drawn, but I felt eyes behind them, watching, and for the first time, I wondered if my daughter had shut me out not because she didn't want me, but because she was trying to save me. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face at the door, pale, trembling, pleading for me to leave. My daughter had always been strong-willed, never one to scare easily. For her to look at me like that, as if my presence was a threat to both of us, left me shaken. The neighbor's words replayed in my mind. Shadows, screams, lights at strange hours. By morning I decided I couldn't just sit back. If my daughter wouldn't tell me what was happening, I'd have to find out myself. I returned to the neighborhood, this time in daylight. The storm had passed, leaving puddles that mirrored the rows of houses. They looked deceptively cheerful under the autumn sun, like little storybook cottages. But when I stood in front of my daughter's home again, I felt the weight of unease pressing against my chest. Her curtains were drawn tight, even though the rest of the neighborhood basked in sunlight. No car in the driveway. Silence. I thought of knocking again, but my pride and fear stopped me. Instead, I turned to the neighbor's porch. She was there, as if waiting. A shawl over her shoulders, her gaze fixed on me. "Back again?" she said softly. "Yes," I admitted, walking closer. "I couldn't just ignore what you said last night. Please, tell me everything." She hesitated, then gestured for me to sit beside her on the porch steps. Her name, she told me, was Mrs. Palmer. She had lived in that neighborhood for 30 years, long before my daughter and her husband had arrived. "I don't like gossip," she began, her voice low. "But what I've seen isn't gossip. It's truth. The kind of truth people pretend not to notice because it's easier that way." I nodded, gripping my handbag so tightly my knuckles whitened. 2 weeks after they moved in, I started noticing the noises. Not just arguments, though there were plenty of those, but worse. Sharp cries, like someone begging. And every time, just when I thought I should call someone, the lights would go out. Total silence, as if nothing had happened. Her words made my stomach twist. "Are you saying my daughter's husband?" Mrs. Palmer raised a hand quickly. "I can't say for sure what goes on inside, but I know what I've heard. And I've seen her once or twice in the yard, late at night, looking over her shoulder like a hunted animal." Then she stopped coming out altogether. The image of my daughter trapped inside that house, alone with him, hit me like a blow. "She told me not to come," I whispered. "She said it wasn't safe." Mrs. Palmer's eyes softened. "She was protecting you. But a mother's place isn't outside the door." For a moment, neither of us spoke. A breeze rustled through the maple trees, scattering golden leaves onto the sidewalks. Normal, ordinary life continued around us, children riding bicycles, a dog barking down the street. And yet my world felt split open. I needed to see her again, to hear from her own lips what was happening. That night, I returned once more. This time, I parked a block away and walked, the cool air biting at my cheeks. My heart pounded with each step. I wasn't going to knock. I was going to watch. I found a spot behind a hedge across the street, the house in full view. Hours passed. At first, nothing, just the faint hum of crickets and the occasional car. But then, close to midnight, a light flickered on in the upstairs window. I leaned forward, my breath catching. A shadow moved across the curtain, broad-shouldered, a man's silhouette. Moments later, another shadow joined, smaller, hesitant. My daughter. The shadow shifted. I couldn't hear, but I could see. His arm lifted, sudden and sharp. Hers flinched. My whole body froze. Then the light snapped off. The darkness that followed was worse than the sight. I wanted to rush across the street, pound on the door, drag her out of there. But Mrs. Palmer's warning echoed in my ears, not safe. If I stormed in recklessly, I might make it worse for her. So instead, I went home, though sleep never came. By morning, my decision was clear. If my daughter wouldn't tell me the truth, I'd have to uncover it myself and bring it into the open. Where he couldn't hide behind closed doors, I just didn't. Yet know the cost? I woke to a house that smelled like yesterday's coffee and rain-soaked wool. The clock read 5:17 a.m., an hour I used to see when my daughter was a baby and colic turned nights into marathons. Back then, I walked the hall until her crying softened against my chest. Now there was only the hiss of the radiator and the stubborn weight of a decision I had already made. I pulled my old leather notebook from the drawer, the one with a broken elastic band and grocery lists buried between phone numbers, and made columns, like I used to do at work when budgets needed taming. Names to call, places to sit, questions I could ask without sounding like a gossip. It steadied me to put ink to paper, to turn fear into lines and bullets of intent. Though I did not draw bullets as dots, I drew small squares, boxes to be checked. By 7, I was outside in a coat that had known better winters, thermos of tea tucked under my arm, walking the long block to the bus stop. I needed to do this without being seen in my car, without patterns. The bus windows were filmed with frost. I rubbed a circle clear with my glove and watched the city wake up, dog walkers with scarves pulled to their eyes, shopkeepers dragging sandwich boards onto sidewalks. Everyone attending to their own little worlds, unaware that mine was contracting around a single address. I got off 2 stops early and circled through the park to avoid the main road. When I reached the neighborhood, the air had the crisp bite of leaves about to give up. Mrs. Palmer was on her porch again, though this time she pretended to fiddle with a hanging plant. "Morning," she said without looking up. "Morning," I answered, settling on the low brick wall that bordered her lawn. From there, my daughter's house sat in a tidy frame between 2 maples, the front walk strewn with yellow fans. No car still. The curtains upstairs were shut like sealed envelopes. "I need to talk to other people on this street," I said quietly. Without spooking them, Mrs. Palmer gave a small nod. "You'll want Mrs. Chen 2 houses down, night shift nurse up at odd hours. And the mailman, Floyd. He's been around since mail was worth reading. Anyone else?" She pursed her lips. "The gardeners who come on Thursdays. 2 teenagers. They see everything because no one sees them." I wrote the names. She watched my pen move and added, "There's also the HOA. They have rules about everything, which means they keep records about everything. And there was a situation at the last meeting. You might want to attend the next one. It's this Friday. Community Hall, 7 p.m. What happened at the last one?" She pressed the soil around a stem with her thumb. "A shouting match about lights left on after midnight and loud noises. Someone mentioned calling the police and someone else said it would only make things worse. Then a motion to table it because no one wanted to name names on the minutes." She glanced at my daughter's house. "The minutes still show the argument. The names don't." I felt that strange mix of fury and gratitude. Fury that people had heard and not acted. Gratitude that at least one person had kept a memory of it they were willing to share. A delivery truck rumbled up the street and stopped at my daughter's mailbox. Not the mailman, too early for him. Packages. The driver set a medium box on the stoop and snapped a photo with his phone. I couldn't read the label from here, but I could see the sharp corners of the tape and the way the box sat too perfectly centered, as if someone had told the driver exactly where to place it. I waited 30 minutes. No one opened the door to retrieve it. "Do you have a camera?" I asked Mrs. Palmer. She tilted her head toward the eaves. "Doorbell camera. And one pointed at the street. I'm old enough to admit I like knowing who comes and goes. May I? She led me inside to a neat front room that smelled faintly of lemon oil. On a small table by the window sat a monitor and a device with a trail of wires like a plastic octopus. She clicked through files, each thumbnail a little story of a day passing. We found last night's timeline. At 11:53 p.m., the upstairs light flickered on. My breath hitched just to see the timestamp. At 11:55, the curtain shadows. 11:57, darkness. No sound, only pictures. The camera caught the delivery driver at 8:12 a.m., the package at 8:13, and then nothing. Can you save these? I asked. Mrs. Palmer inserted a memory card with the practiced hands of someone who had cataloged more than a few Christmas mornings. I'll make a copy. Take it. When I stepped back outside, the sun had inched higher. The package sat the same. A bird hopped along the porch rail, cocked its head at the cardboard, and flew off startled by nothing I could see. I went 2 houses down and found Mrs. Chen's front walk swept clean. She answered my knock in scrubs with tiny stethoscopes printed like confetti. I'm sorry to bother you, I said. I know who you are, she said gently, and invited me in with a tilt of her head. Come, I have 10 minutes before I sleep. Her living room was soft with blankets and a couch that swallowed you. I told her I was worried about my daughter, that I wanted to understand the nights. I come home around 2 or 3, she said, lowering into an armchair. Sometimes I sit on my steps just to breathe in air that isn't disinfectant. I hear things. She folded her hands. I hear pleading, a woman trying to make her voice small, and a man who likes sighs. Have you ever seen her? In the yard once, very late. She had a sweater on, though it was warm. She was shaking so hard the sweater looked like it had raindrops in it. I asked if she needed help. She said no without words. Eyes can refuse. Then the back door opened, and a man's voice said her name, and she jumped like her name was a knife. I went inside and called the non-emergency line. They told me unless I had seen a crime, there wasn't much they could do. I called anyway 3 times. A patrol car came by once. They slowed, they kept driving. It took effort to keep my voice steady. Thank you for calling, I said. For trying, she touched my sleeve. Be careful. Some men break the thing they cannot control. Outside, the sky had turned the hard blue of a day that means business. Floyd the mailman came with his steady gait and a hat that had seen every season. I met him at the curb like a conspirator. Morning, he said. Cheerful by profession. Morning, Floyd. Your eyes, he said, and then corrected himself. I can tell you're a mother with something on your mind. How can I help? Do you notice patterns? I asked. Who sends packages? Who picks them up? He scratched his chin. They get a lot of boxes for folks who don't live there. Different names. Sometimes initials only. Always care of your daughter's husband. He signs when he's home. She doesn't come out. He looked at the unclaimed box. He won't like that sitting there. He likes control. The box will not remain uncollected. The world cannot be allowed to look untidy in front of his house. Do you ever see her at the door? Not lately, he said. Early on, I saw her once. Nice girl. Thanked me like the mail was a kindness. He came up behind her, said he'd handle it from now on. He has a way of talking like a door closing. When he moved on, I felt my plan sharpen. Boxes with other people's names. Deliveries that come like clockwork. It was leverage if it was nothing legal, and even if it was, all that regularity could be turned into proof of something. At minimum, it was a rope I could pull. I returned to my vigil by Mrs. Palmer's low brick wall. At 9:42, the front door cracked open an inch. The chain was on. A hand reached out, my daughter's hand, the little scar on the thumb from when she helped me peel apples as a child. She tried to drag the package closer with her fingertips. It wouldn't budge. Her hand disappeared, the door swallowed it, and then opened again, wider this time. She glanced left, then right, and in that split second our eyes found each other across the sunlit space between porches. Relief surged through me, fast and bright. She shook her head, tiny, a hummingbird no one else could see. Her mouth shaped the word no. I didn't move. I didn't wave. I only blinked once, slow. She pulled the package in with a strength that spoke of urgency and vanished. I waited 5 minutes to breathe the air all the way out. Then my phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring twice before answering. "Don't come back." Her voice was paper thin. "Sweetheart, don't say my name. Don't text," he checks. "I have 2 minutes. I saw you." A whisper, the kind that slices. "Thank you for not crossing. If you do, he wins." "I want you out," I said, keeping my voice a lake without ripples. "Tell me how." She was silent long enough that the silence became a sound. "There's a closet in the hallway. Top shelf. In a shoebox. From when I ran track in 10th grade. The one with the blue stripe. He doesn't know it's there." Another pause. "Proof. Not enough, but something. If you can get it. If not, Friday. The meeting. I asked for a variance months ago so I could put bars on the upstairs window. He fought it. He'll be there to fight again." Her breath hitched. "I have to go." The call ended so abruptly, I kept the phone to my ear for a heartbeat too long, listening to a line that was already a memory. "The closet," I said aloud, to anchor the word. Friday. Breaking into my daughter's house in broad daylight would be a performance no one would applaud. But I couldn't wait until Friday night. Proof lives in the present and dies fast when watched. I needed another angle. "Back door," Mrs. Palmer murmured as if reading my thoughts. "The latch is loud, but the yard service oils hinges when they mow. They're due tomorrow. If you can wait 24 hours, you might not sound like a burglar." I didn't want to wait, but patience is a tool I had sharpened over a lifetime. I used the day to prepare. I borrowed a small body camera from a friend who volunteered at the community theater, the kind they used in productions to capture. Behind-the-scenes footage, strapped, it low under my scarf where my hands could flip it on without looking. I charged my old digital recorder, the one I kept from my teaching days to remember parent conferences. I baked again, because dough that comes together under your palms is a kind of courage. This time I made small scones with currants and tucked them into a tin, not because I intended to bring them, but because the ritual steadied me. It reminded me that mothers create, and creation is the quiet twin of rescue. At dusk, I took a long walk and tested my feet on lawns and gravel, learning which surfaces sang and which kept secrets. I found the narrow gap between the tall hedge and the side fence. I counted my steps from sidewalk to gate. On the way home, I stopped 3 blocks away to buy a roll of painter's tape. An odd purchase at a corner market, but essential in my mind for lifting a stray print if the chance came. A habit from a safety seminar I'd sat through ages ago and never thought I'd need. The night was a book of pages that wouldn't turn. I lay on the couch in the blue light from my phone and reread old messages from my daughter. Birthday plans, a recipe for soup I'd taught her, a photo of a fern she'd rescued and named Millie. You cannot hold a person with a phone, but sometimes the glow in your hand feels like a handbag. Thursday arrived wearing the crisp shirt of a schedule. At 10, the mowers came, teens in orange vests and headphones the size of mugs. They buzzed the grass into obedience and left a map of neat lines across the yard. They oiled the gate hinge with a quick flick. I heard the soft metallic sigh of relief. At noon, I saw him. My son-in-law walked up the front steps with a grocery bag and a jaw set for war with any world that defied him. He was handsome in the way wolves are, lean, symmetrical, eyes that do math when they look at you. He unlocked the door, then stopped and glanced at the porch columns, running his hand along one like a man greeting a horse. An inspection. He went inside. The door closed. I recorded the time. At 2, the house was quiet. At 2:30, I pulled my cap low, slung a canvas tote over my shoulder like any woman carrying nothing interesting, and walked boldly down the sidewalk past a row of houses that had decided I was a ghost. I turned at the hedge, slipped into the narrow passage, and stopped at the back gate. The hinge made the tiniest polite sound when I lifted it. I stepped into a yard that smelled of cut grass and damp soil and fear. I could see the hallway window through a sliver in the drawn shade. I could hear the hum of a refrigerator and the small electronic chirp that tells you batteries are dying somewhere. I put my palm flat to the back door. It was cool. I pictured the bolt, the chain, the simple language of locks. Then I thought of my daughter's track shoes, the blue stripe, the box on the high shelf, and decided that if the door did not open, I would find a way to climb. It opened. A breath of inside air washed me, detergent, something floral, and an undertone of metal that made the back of my tongue taste like pennies. The kitchen was immaculate. 2 mugs on the counter, his near the sink, hers upside down on a drying cloth like a little white helmet. I slipped inside and closed the door with a care that made my shoulders judder. The camera under my scarf hummed softly when I clicked it on. I could feel its red dot burning a hole in my courage. The hallway was dim. I moved like a woman with tired joints because that is what I am, which is useful when you need to make each step a decision. The closet was halfway down on the left, a plain door with a brushed nickel knob. I listened, counted to 7 to steady my pulse, and opened it. Shelves, coats, and avalanches worth of shoes with their tongues lolling. I reached up and felt cardboard. 2 boxes. I drew the first down. Brand name I didn't recognize. Inside, nothing but a winter scarf. The second had a blue stripe. It wasn't heavy, but my hands shook so badly the lid clattered against the shelf. I winced, waited. Silence. I lifted the lid. Under old race bibs and a curled ribbon sat a small red notebook, the cheap kind sold by the register in drug stores, its spine cracked with use. A flash drive in a plastic sleeve. A folded letter with my name, written in my daughter's careful, slow hand, the loops of the Y and G made by someone whose wrists had learned caution. I slipped the flash drive into the inner pocket of my coat. The notebook I opened to the center and read 3 lines at random because I couldn't help myself. Dates, brief entries, phrases like left wrist again and apologized after and neighbors must have heard. I swallowed the salt that rose in my mouth and closed it. The letter I tucked against my heart because that is where it was already. Footsteps. I froze. They weren't upstairs, they weren't outside. They were the footsteps of someone stepping from carpet to tile, the sound changing like a word, turning into a different word halfway through its own pronunciation. I pushed the box back in place. My hands betrayed me and fumbled the lid. It landed askew. I didn't fix it. I eased the closet door until it clicked shut, soft as a kiss. The footsteps came closer, slow and sure, like they owned the counting of them. I stepped into the nearest room, the small half-bath off the hall, closed the door without the latch, and stood with my back to the sink, the camera warming my collarbone. The footsteps paused outside the closet. The closet door opened. The muffled thud of a box being shifted. Breath, a soft, irritated exhale. The door closed again. The footsteps moved on toward the kitchen. A drawer opened. Silverware chattered. A refrigerator hummed louder when the seal broke, then settled when it closed. A cupboard door shut. Water ran briefly. A mug clicked onto the counter. He was making a drink. The ordinary soundtrack of an ordinary day. I counted to 10 in a whisper that didn't move my lips, opened the bathroom door, and, foolishly, brilliantly, stepped into the hall as if I had every right to be where I was. He turned. The mug hovered an inch above the counter. "Well?" he said, his voice wearing a smile his mouth didn't bother with. "We don't take appointments, but it's always nice when family drops in." Every instinct screamed to run, and every year I had lived told me to stand. I did the latter. "I knocked," I lied, letting a grandmother's theatrics drape my words. "I thought you might not hear. I was in the neighborhood and brought scones." He glanced at my tote bag, as if considering its weight against my worth. "You know she's busy," he said. "Settling the house. We keep a schedule here." "She asked me to come," I said, and watched a narrow vein jump in his temple. "Friday, the meeting. You'll be there, won't you? It seems you have opinions about windows." He moved around the island slowly, closing space the way fog does. His pupils were too dark. "We have opinions about safety," he said, "which includes not having unannounced visitors. It upsets my wife." "If she's upset," I said, "it doesn't come from visitors." He smiled then, a quick tilt of the mouth like a dog showing teeth. "Careful. You first." The microwave beeped anywhere and nowhere, the end of some time thing I hadn't seen him start. It cut the moment in half. He reached to the counter for his mug. I saw the tremor in his hand and realized it wasn't fear. It was rage looking for a handle. "I'll walk you out," he said. "You might trip over something. We wouldn't want that." The hallway felt narrower walking the other way. Sunlight pressed through the back door curtain like a hand trying to get in. When we reached the door, he stopped and touched the chain with one finger, almost absently, as if to remind me of its existence. I stepped outside into air that felt brand new and walked across the yard without looking back. I didn't breathe until the gate closed behind me and the hinge murmured its tiny sigh. Mrs. Palmer met me at her porch with a glass of water. I didn't realize I'd been shaking until I tried to drink. The water shivered in the glass, catching sunlight and throwing it in small knives onto my wrist. "He saw you," she said. "He did," I said, and I saw him. I saw what's left when a person chips away at his own soul until it fits in his fist. I sat. My knees had become strangers. I reached into my coat and pressed my palm against the letter, as if my hand could read through paper. Proof. A flash drive that might hold video or audio or photos I would hate forever. A notebook with days pinned to a page like butterflies that had once been free. I wanted to go home right that minute and plug the drive in and begin turning private horror into public fact. Across the street, a curtain shivered. For the first time, I saw my daughter's face at the upstairs window, split by a strip of fabric like a horizon-cutting sky from earth. She was not bruised that I could see. She was not smiling, but her hand lifted and made the smallest motion, an opening and closing of fingers, a tide going out and coming in. The gesture we used when she was little, and we were trying to say, "I see you," without alerting a bored teacher or a librarian guarding silence. I answered with the same small tide. Then I stood, put the glass on the step, and told Mrs. Palmer, "Friday. He likes rooms where he thinks he owns the rules. Let's bring him a rule he can't edit." That night I sat at my kitchen table with the letter opened under the lamp. Her handwriting was steady in the way the body steadies when it cannot afford to shake. "Mom, if you're reading this, it means I found the nerve to do what I should have done sooner. I'm sorry. I know you'll tell me not to say that word, but I mean it only as a marker of time." He controls money and passwords and schedules and who I'm allowed to call and how long and what I'm allowed to say. But control is not the same as truth. The truth is, I'm afraid. The truth is, I thought I could fix it by being better at being small. The truth is, small keeps shrinking. The flash drive has clips from my phone. He doesn't know I backed them up to an old email he never saw because it's the one I used for the college newspaper. The notebook is for me, but if I can't get to Friday, it's for you. Please make it matter. Please make it public. I love you. I do. I'm sorry I told you not to come. I didn't know how to keep you safe and keep myself from drowning at the same time. I folded the letter and pressed it to my face, breathing paper and ink and my child's courage. Then I turned to the flash drive, slid it into my old laptop, and watched as files bloomed like bruises along the directory. Dates, times, short videos, audio, a few photos taken in. Mirrors with sleeves tugged back just enough to say what words. Couldn't. It was all the proof that a courtroom would call evidence and a mother would call too much. I made 3 copies. One for the police if they would listen. One for the HOA because a body of neighbors pretending not to hear is still a body that can be made to look. One for a lawyer I would call in the morning. The woman who helped Mrs. Gomez on our block get a restraining order last spring and did it in a way that made paperwork feel like a shield instead of a weight. Then, I wrote an email to the HOA chair, requesting time on the agenda Friday to speak about a denied variance and a larger matter of safety. I CC'd the property manager because men like my son-in-law often respect titles they can't control. I kept my language cool as a pond. Facts floated. I did not use the word violence. I used the word liability. When I finally climbed into bed, the house no longer smelled like yesterday's coffee. It smelled like iron resolve and printer ink and something I hadn't felt in months. A thin white thread of hope running from my chest to a window where a hand had opened and closed like a tide. Friday would come. He would be there, and for once, he would not be the only one who had prepared. Friday arrived like a storm without thunder. Everything still, but heavy in the air, charged. I spent the day pacing between the living room and kitchen, tea growing cold in the cup, my thoughts circling the same track like horses too restless to stop. The flash drive lay in a sealed envelope inside my handbag. The notebook I had hidden in a drawer under dish towels, safer in plain sight. The letter, though, I kept that in my coat pocket close to my heart. Every time I touched it, it steadied me. By 6 o'clock I could no longer sit. I put on my good wool coat, the one with shoulders that made me feel upright, and walked to the community hall. The sidewalks were crowded with people carrying umbrellas, though the sky had not yet opened. They were neighbors, some nodding politely, others whispering in 2s and 3s. An ordinary HOA meeting to anyone else. To me, it was the first stage of a battle. Inside, the hall smelled of old coffee and disinfectant. Folding chairs had been lined in rows, facing a table where the board sat with their papers. I took a seat near the middle, close enough to be heard, far enough not to be dismissed as a meddling elder in the front row, and then he walked in. My son-in-law. Crisp suit, jaw tight, a faint smile playing on his lips as though the whole evening was a performance he'd already scripted. He greeted a couple near the doorway with practiced charm, shook the chairwoman's hand, and sat in the front row. Every gesture calculated to show control. But I noticed his eyes flick toward the back where I sat. His smile faltered a fraction. He hadn't expected me. The meeting began with small issues, trash collection, landscaping, parking complaints. My heart beat louder with each item, knowing what was coming. Finally, the chair cleared her throat. Next on the agenda, Discussion of variance requests denied at the previous session. Specifically, the matter of window modifications at the Palmer residence and at the residence of... She glanced at the paper. Mr. and Mrs. Carter. My daughter's house. My son-in-law stood smoothly, buttoning his jacket. Yes, Madam Chair. As I explained last time, bars on upper-story windows are unnecessary in this neighborhood and would damage property values. Our community thrives because it remains safe, open, and welcoming. To allow such prison-like features would set a precedent we cannot accept. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. He turned slightly, scanning the room, making sure he had their nods. And then I rose. My knees trembled, but my voice did not. With respect, I said, safety isn't always visible from the sidewalk. Sometimes what happens behind those windows is exactly why protection is needed. The room quieted. He turned slowly, eyes narrowing. Mrs. Turner, he said smoothly, while we all value your perspective, I don't think this concerns you. It concerns me when my daughter lives in that house, I said. Gasps. Heads turned. The board members looked suddenly uneasy, caught between procedure and drama. My son-in-law's smile sharpened. Your daughter is very well cared for. She simply prefers privacy, something you seem unwilling to respect. I opened my handbag, drew out the envelope, and placed it on the table in front of the board. Privacy should never be used to hide harm. In this envelope is evidence, video, photographs, records that speak for the windows better than I ever could. The air shifted. You could feel it. Curiosity, shock, unease. Whispers rose like wind through leaves. The chair cleared her throat. Mrs. Turner, perhaps this is better handled. No, I said firmly, my voice carrying farther than I expected. We have spent too long pretending not to hear. Neighbors hear screams. Packages arrive under false names. Lights burn at hours that don't match peace. You all know. You've chosen silence. Tonight, silence ends. My son-in-law's composure cracked for the first time. He stepped forward quickly. This is slander. She is an elderly woman with a history of... Careful, I cut in, meeting his eyes. I am an elderly woman with proof. The room erupted, some demanding to see the evidence, others urging restraint. The chair finally banged the gavel, calling order. She looked at me, then at him, then at the envelope. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. In that moment, I saw his mask slip entirely. Rage flickered across his face, cold, sharp, dangerous. And I knew. The reckoning had begun, and it would not stop here. The chairwoman slid the envelope across the table as if it were a live wire. Her fingers trembled slightly when she opened the flap and drew out the flash drive. She held it up between two fingers. Mrs. Turner, she said, her voice tight, are you prepared to explain what is on this? I nodded once. Evidence. Recordings of what happens behind my daughter's closed doors. It is not pleasant, but it is real, the room murmured again. A man in the back cleared his throat. If this is true, the police ought to handle it, not us. Yes, I agreed, raising my chin. And they will. But you, all of you, have turned away from what you've heard and seen. This community prides itself on safety. Yet you ignored the screams at night. You filed complaints about window bars as if appearances mattered more than lives. Tonight you look directly at what you have chosen not to see. The chair glanced at the other board members. One of them, a younger woman with sharp glasses, plugged the drive into her laptop. The projector flickered to life, filling the wall with an image. It was my daughter, filmed from her phone in a bathroom mirror, her sleeve tugged back. Dark bruises ringed her wrist. Her voice whispered low, "If you find this, please know I tried." The room went utterly still. Then another clip played, Audio only, this time. A man's voice, sharp, cutting. My son-in-law's. You think anyone will believe you? You're nothing without me. The sound of something breaking followed, and a muffled sob. Gasps broke through the silence. Someone muttered, "Oh my God." Another whispered, "I knew I heard something." I kept my eyes fixed on him. My son-in-law stood rigid, jaw tight, fists clenched at his sides. The smooth mask he always wore had shattered. He looked like what he was, cornered. "This is fabricated," he snapped suddenly, his voice rising. "Anyone can edit recordings. You're all fools if you believe this nonsense." But no one answered him. They were still staring at the wall, the images, the sounds. Truth had weight, and it pressed down on every soul in that hall. I took a step forward. My voice shook, but it carried. I raised my daughter to believe her voice mattered. He tried to strip that away, but tonight her voice is here, with all of you. You cannot unhear it. The chairwoman cleared her throat, struggling to maintain order. "Mr. Carter, until this matter is reviewed by the proper authorities, we cannot proceed with your objection. In fact," she glanced at the others, "I believe it would be prudent to call law enforcement immediately." At that, he moved. Fast. He lunged for the laptop, as if destroying the evidence in front of witnesses could still undo what had been shown. But two men from the audience rose at once, Floyd the mailman and another neighbor, and intercepted him. Chairs clattered. Voices shouted. I stood frozen, clutching my coat, until I heard the sharp call of the chair. "Someone call the police now." Within minutes, flashing lights painted the windows red and blue. Officers entered, calm but firm, separating him from the crowd, handcuffing him as he spat accusations and threats. His eyes burned into mine as they led him away. "You'll regret this," he hissed. I lifted my chin. "No. The only regret is that it took this long." As the doors closed behind him, the room let out a collective breath, as if every person had been holding air for years. Neighbors turned toward me, not with pity, but with something else. Shame, recognition, resolve. And though my knees trembled, I felt taller than I had in years. My daughter's truth was out, and truth once freed does not go back into silence. The hall emptied slowly, as though people feared what waited outside might cling to them if they left too quickly. Some avoided my eyes, others stopped to squeeze my hand, their words hushed apologies. "We should have done something sooner." We didn't know how bad it was. I only nodded. There would be time later for them to wrestle with their guilt. My focus was on one person, my daughter, but she wasn't there. I scanned the room, the rows of folding chairs, the doorway where he had been dragged out in cuffs. No sign of her. My heart sank. Had she been too afraid to come? Or worse, had he kept her from leaving the house? I walked quickly into the night air. The flashing lights had faded. The patrol car carrying him was already gone. Another officer stood by his cruiser, jotting notes. I hurried over. "My daughter," I said breathlessly. "She lives in that house. Please check on her." The officer's face softened. "We already have a unit en route. Would you like to accompany us?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. The drive back to her street felt endless. My hands clutched the letter in my coat pocket, the words my daughter had written burning against my skin. When we turned onto her block, I saw Mrs. Palmer standing at her porch, arms folded tight, watching everything. A silent sentinel. The cruiser pulled into the driveway. The officers approached the door, knocked firmly. For a long moment, nothing. My stomach twisted. Then, slowly, the door opened. My daughter stood there. Hair mussed, eyes red but standing. Behind her, the house looked strangely bare, as though life had been scrubbed out of it. She blinked at the officers, then at me. "Mom," she whispered. I moved forward, arms out, but stopped short, afraid of overwhelming her. Sweetheart, it's over. They took him. Her lips parted in disbelief. He's gone? I nodded. Gone. And then she collapsed into my arms. Not fainting, just surrender. Years of fear pouring out in sobs against my shoulder. I held her tightly, rocking her as if she were still a little girl who had scraped her knee. The officers spoke quietly, explaining procedures, offering resources. I heard their words dimly, my focus only on her trembling frame in my arms. She was safe. For the first time in years, she was truly safe. We sat together on the porch steps as neighbors peeked from windows, shamefaced but curious. Mrs. Palmer crossed the lawn and pressed a thermos into my daughter's hands. Tea, she said simply. My daughter managed a small, grateful smile. That night, she came home with me. Not her house, not his house, mine. She walked through my front door, carrying nothing but the clothes on her back and the letter she had written me. I made up her old room with fresh sheets, the ones with faded lilac patterns, and when she lay down, she whispered, I can breathe here. I kissed her forehead. Then breathe, darling. Just breathe. For the first time in years, I slept deeply, but morning brought questions. What would happen next? What charges would he face? Could he manipulate his way out as men like him so often tried? My daughter would need more than freedom. She would need justice, and I was not done fighting. Morning sunlight filtered through my curtains, but it felt different. Not harsh, not accusatory, gentler, like the first hint of spring. I found my daughter in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a mug between her hands. She looked so young in that moment, younger than she had in years, as though fear had aged her faster than time. I don't know what to do now, she murmured, not looking up. You don't have to know everything today, I said, pouring tea. One breath at a time, one step at a time, but I knew she was right. Freedom without protection was fragile. He was clever, manipulative, the kind of man who could twist truth into lies if given the chance. We needed to ensure he couldn't slip through cracks. By mid-morning, a detective arrived. A woman in her 40s, sharp eyes but a kind voice. She asked my daughter to tell her story, slowly, piece by piece. My daughter's hands shook, but she spoke, about the shouting, the threats, the bruises hidden under sleeves. About the nights she wanted to run but had nowhere to go. About the packages that arrived, not for them but for strangers. How he made her sign under different names. The detective nodded gravely. That matches reports we've been tracking. He's been running more than one scheme. Your testimony and the recordings may be enough to tie everything together. I exhaled. Proof. Not just of his violence, but of his crimes. He couldn't bury this. Over the next days, the house filled with visits, lawyers, advocates, neighbors who came shamefaced with casseroles and apologies. My daughter barely spoke to them, but I did. I wanted them to feel it, the weight of their silence. Mrs. Palmer came every evening, bringing little comforts, a knitted shawl, fresh bread. You both need strength, she said simply. Through it all, my daughter and I rebuilt small routines. Cooking together, walking around the block, sitting in the garden with blankets on our laps. It was fragile, but it was something. Then came the hearing. We sat side by side in the courthouse, my hand covering hers. He entered in cuffs, still trying to carry himself like a man in control. But the evidence spoke louder. The recordings, the packages traced to fraud, the testimonies of neighbors who finally admitted what they'd heard. Piece by piece, the mask he wore crumbled. When my daughter took the stand, her voice trembled at first. But then she straightened, looked him in the eye, and spoke with a strength I hadn't seen since she was a teenager running track, face set with determination. "I was afraid of him," she said. "But I'm not anymore. Not now." The courtroom was silent. Even he didn't speak. The gavel fell. Orders of protection were issued. Charges filed. He was led away not as a man of power, but as a prisoner of his own choices. Outside, reporters asked questions, cameras flashing. I shielded my daughter, guiding her through the crowd. She leaned against me, whispering, "Thank you, Mom, for not giving up." I squeezed her hand. That's what mothers do. We don't give up. Not ever. For the first time, I felt the knot inside me loosen. Not gone, but loosening. The days after the hearing felt like stepping into a world we had both forgotten, one where mornings weren't ruled by fear, where silence wasn't heavy with dread. My daughter stayed with me, her old room slowly filling again with her presence, a sweater draped over the chair, a book left open on the nightstand, the faint scent of lavender lotion. Healing didn't happen all at once. Some nights she still woke gasping, clutching the sheets. I would sit beside her, stroking her hair until her breathing calmed. Other times she would stand by the window, staring into the dark, as if expecting him to appear. I reminded her, "He can't reach you now." He can't. Neighbors tried to make amends. Mrs. Chen came with dumplings and tears in her eyes. Floyd the mailman stopped by with a basket of fruit, awkward but sincere. Even the younger couple down the street knocked one evening, admitting they had heard things but didn't know what to do. My daughter listened politely, but it was Mrs. Palmer who earned her trust. Night after night she came, sitting quietly with us, knitting while we drank tea. Sometimes kindness is loud. Hers was steady and quiet. One afternoon, as autumn leaves swirled across my porch, my daughter said, "I want to go back to the house, just once, to take what's mine." So we went together. The locks had already been changed by court order. The rooms felt hollow, stripped of his presence. Still, shadows lingered in the corners. My daughter moved slowly, gathering things, photo albums, her grandmother's quilt, the fern she had named Millie. In the closet, she found her old track shoes, dusty but still there. She cradled them like relics of a girl who had once been fast, free. As we left, she turned the key in the lock one final time. "This isn't home," she whispered. "Not anymore." Back at my house, she spread the quilt across her bed, placed the fern on the sill, and slipped her shoes into the closet. Small acts, but powerful. Roots beginning again. Weeks passed. Winter edged closer. The case against him grew stronger with each new piece of evidence, financial records, testimonies, the recordings. He wasn't just facing charges of abuse, but fraud, theft, coercion. His empire of control was crumbling. Through it all, my daughter's spirit began to shine again. She laughed more, cooked with me, even joined Mrs. Palmer at the church knitting circle. One evening, as we sat by the fire, she took my hand. "Mom," she said softly, "I was so cruel to you. I pushed you away. I told you not to come. But you came anyway. You saved me." Tears blurred my vision. "You don't need to apologize, darling. Fear makes us do things we can't explain. What matters is you're safe now." She rested her head on my shoulder. "Safe. Because of you." In that moment, the weight I had carried for months lifted. I wasn't just her mother. I was her anchor, and she was mine. The neighborhood changed, too. People no longer turned away. They spoke openly at meetings about vigilance, about not ignoring what they heard. The silence that had once protected him was gone. As for me, I found peace in small things again. The smell of cookies baking, The sound of my daughter humming as she folded laundry, the quiet of a house no longer haunted by secrets. One evening, while closing the curtains, I caught sight of Mrs. Palmer across the street. She raised a hand in a small wave. I waved back, gratitude swelling in my chest. Without her first whispered warning, I might never have known the danger my daughter faced. Life didn't return to what it had been before. It became something new, something stronger. My daughter had scars, but she also had courage, and I had the certainty that even when pushed away, a mother's love will find its way back, because in the end, she hadn't truly banished me. Fear had, and when fear was gone, love remained, and that more than anything was our victory.